Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today, we're heading all the way back to ancient Egypt to explore the story of Joseph and his family from the book of Genesis.
It's a fascinating story, packed with twists and turns, betrayals, you name it. And surprisingly, it's full of lessons that are relevant to us even today.
That's right. We're going to be talking about things like how to manage resources, the importance of gratitude, even about cultural identity, and how to build bridges between different cultures. All that from a story that's thousands of years old.
You'd be amazed how much wisdom is packed into these ancient tales.
Okay, so let's dive in. We're in the middle of a severe famine. People are desperate for food, and then there's Joseph.
Now, he's risen to power in Egypt, but it wasn't an easy path. Remember, his own brothers sold him into slavery.
Oh, yeah, that's right. It's a dramatic story.
But he ends up interpreting dreams for the pharaoh, and through his wisdom and insight, becomes, well, like the pharaoh's right-hand man.
Okay, so he's in a position of power.
Exactly. And here's the thing. He's been anticipating this famine and has been stockpiling grain.
Really? Wow, that's thinking ahead.
Absolutely. And it wasn't about personal gain either. He was thinking about the entire nation.
It's impressive. But then his brothers, the ones who betrayed him, they show up in Egypt looking for food. You gotta wonder what was going through his mind when he saw them.
Right. You'd think he'd be tempted to get some revenge.
I know I would be.
But instead, he welcomes them, forgives them.
Wow. How do you even begin to forgive something like that?
That's the heart of the story, isn't it? That act of forgiveness and reconciliation.
It's a powerful message. And then, well, Pharaoh, he's impressed with Joseph, welcomes his entire family to Egypt, gives him this really fertile land, Goshen.
It was the best land, perfect for their flocks and herds. And it shows you Pharaoh respected them, respected their way of life, their culture.
That's right. And the respect goes both ways. Jacob the father, he blesses Pharaoh. So you have this mutual respect between these two very different cultures.
Absolutely. Even back then, people from different backgrounds found ways to live together peacefully, even learn from each other.
And it gets even more complicated because as the famine gets worse, everyone in Egypt, they need Joseph's help.
And that's where his planning comes in. He put a system in place to make sure everyone survived.
So how did it work? What did he do?
Well, at first, people traded their livestock for food. When their livestock ran out, they traded their land. And finally, when they had nothing left, they basically offered themselves up as servants to Pharaoh in exchange for survival.
So it saved lives, but it was also a huge shift in power, right?
Exactly. It's complicated. It raises questions about survival and individual freedom. It's something societies have always struggled with.
And then there's a really interesting detail of the priests, they were exempt from this system.
That's right. They received an allotment directly from Pharaoh, didn't have to give up their land.
That's interesting. I wonder why.
It tells you something about the importance of the priests, their role in society, even in the middle of a crisis.
And then we have this really powerful moment at the end of the chapter. Jacob's getting older, and he makes Joseph promise to bury him back in their homeland, Canaan.
That was incredibly important to them.
Why? Why Canaan? They'd been living in Egypt for years at this point.
It goes back to his heritage, the promises made to his ancestors. It shows this deep connection he had to his roots, to where he came from.
It makes you think about how important our own backgrounds and histories are, right? How they shape who we are.
Exactly. And in a world that's constantly changing, becoming more globalized, it's easy to lose sight of that. Jacob's story is a reminder to cherish our heritage, those traditions that connect us to our past.
So we've got this ancient story full of drama, intrigue, and surprisingly relevant lessons for today. I'm really interested to dig deeper into how these lessons apply to our lives in the 21st century.
Well, there's a lot to unpack. We've only just scratched the surface.
Okay, then let's get into it.
When you think about it, Joseph's system for handling that famine, it has some interesting parallels to the economic stuff we deal with today.
That's a really good point. Financial planning, resource management, it's something we hear about all the time.
Right.
But this story, it takes it to a whole other level.
Exactly. Joseph, he was prepared, he saw the crisis coming, and he knew he had to save, invest, diversify, all those things we talk about today.
Like having an emergency fund.
Right. And it's not just about money, it's about using resources wisely for yourself and for your community.
So it's not selfish. He wasn't just hoarding grain for himself.
No, not at all. He was thinking about everyone. And then there's this other theme that really stands out, this humility and gratitude.
Oh, yeah. Joseph's family, they went through a lot, but they never lost sight of what they had to be thankful for.
Exactly. They accepted Pharaoh's generosity with grace and humility, a great reminder that even when things are tough, gratitude can make a big difference.
It's so easy to get caught up in wanting more, more, more. But this story, it teaches us about appreciating what we have.
Absolutely. And their humility, too. They didn't let their new status go to their heads.
Which is a good lesson for all of us, right? Stay grounded.
Yeah. And then there's Jacob's request to be buried back in Canaan, that desire to return to his homeland. It really says something about the importance of honoring our heritage.
It's amazing, really. After all those years in Egypt, he still felt so connected to Canaan.
Yeah, it shows you how powerful cultural identity is. And in today's world, with so much globalization, it's a message that's more important than ever.
People
Yeah.
are moving all over the place,
Yeah.
trying to build new lives. It's easy to lose touch with your roots.
And that's why Jacob's story is so important. It reminds us that our culture, our heritage, it's a source of strength, something to be cherished.
It's not about rejecting the new or clinging to the past. It's about finding that balance.
Exactly. Holding on to what's meaningful while still adapting to the present. We can be citizens of the world and still honor our own unique cultures.
This is really starting to come together now. We've got financial wisdom, gratitude, humility, cultural identity. But there's one more piece I think we need to talk about, especially today.
I think I know where you're going with this. Building bridges between cultures.
Exactly. Jacob and Pharaoh, they were from different worlds, but they treated each other with respect. They tried to understand each other.
It's a model for how we can approach cross-cultural relationships today. We need to look for common ground, celebrate our shared humanity.
Diversity is an opportunity, not a threat, right?
Right. We can learn so much from each other if we just open our minds.
So how do we do that? How do we actually break down these barriers and build those bridges?
It starts with being willing to step outside of our comfort zones, I think. Talking to people who are different from us, really listening to them.
It takes effort, doesn't it?
Yeah.
To build those relationships.
It does, but it's so worth it. Because it's in those connections that we find the real beauty of humanity.
We start to see the world in a whole new way.
And we build a more peaceful, more interconnected world.
This story is incredible. I mean, it's thousands of years old, but it's like this timeless guidebook for how to live.
It really is.
But before we finish, I want to go back to forgiveness for a minute. Joseph forgiving his brothers. It's such a powerful example, especially today, with all the conflict and division we see.
It is. And we talked about how complex that forgiveness was, but did he really let go of the pain? Or was it just a strategic move to save his family?
That's a good question.
We don't know for sure, do we? But we do know that he understood how destructive holding on to anger can be.
Like you would just eat him up inside.
Right. And choosing to forgive, it freed him. And it allowed his brothers to deal with their own guilt.
It's like a ripple effect, right?
Yeah.
Forgiveness can change everything.
And it's a reminder that it's not about saying what happened was okay. It's about letting go of that anger so you can move forward.
It's a gift to yourself as much as it is to the other person.
Exactly. And sometimes it takes time. You might not be able to forgive right away or completely. And that's okay. Just keep your heart open to the possibility.
As we wrap up, it strikes me how this story, it's really about emotional intelligence, isn't it?
It really is. It's like a guide to understanding, well, I guess understanding your own emotions and other people's.
Right. You see it everywhere. Joseph forgiving his brothers realizing what they did was wrong. Even Jacob's faith.
And what's interesting is you hear about forgiveness like it's this easy thing, let go, move on. But this story, it shows you it's not that simple.
Oh, definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, the brothers didn't just apologize and everything was fine.
No, not at all. It took time. There was guilt, consequences. Joseph even tested them before he told them who he was.
It makes you wonder if all that process, if that was part of the healing, for everyone involved.
I think so. True forgiveness, it's not about forgetting. It's about recognizing the hurt, admitting what went wrong, and then figuring out how to move forward.
And that takes time, right? It's
Right.
not just, oh, okay, I forgive you. Let's go have lunch.
Exactly. And sometimes you might get angry again. Those feelings might come back, but you have to keep trying to understand each other.
It makes you think about, how we handle things in our own lives. Do we give ourselves the time and space to actually heal?
That's a good question to ask yourself. And remember, forgiveness, it's not just about the person who did something wrong. It's about the person who forgives too.
That's right. Holding on to all that anger, it can really hurt you.
It can. So when Joseph forgave his brothers, it was helping himself just as much.
He didn't want to be trapped by the past.
Exactly. And that's the thing about forgiveness. It's not saying what happened was okay. It's about letting go of that pain so you can actually live your life.
So much wisdom in this story.
There really is. And even though it's, an ancient story, the message is timeless. There's always hope. There's always a chance for healing, even when things seem impossible.
That's a good note to end on. This story, it reminds us what it means to be human, how to deal with tough relationships, tough emotions, and ultimately how to build a better future.
Beautifully put. And while the details of Joseph's story might be ancient history, the lessons it offers are just as relevant today.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful. We certainly did.